So we are on our third session. This session is recorded, so if anyone's not here today, they can watch and do the makeup activity. We'll be here until 3:30 this afternoon. We're going to focus on common formative assessments, rubrics, and then Catherine's going to have us put it all together in an activity later. By the end of the session, we're really hoping that you'll be able to explain the purpose, process, and use of common formative assessments within the PLC context, develop a common formative assessment and a rubric, and then assess your common formative assessment and rubric later on today. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and she's going to get us started with common formative assessments.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Nice to see you all this afternoon. I'm in Fremont, which is in Northern California, on a beautiful sunny afternoon. So, assessment for learning. What does the for mean to you? Anyone, real quick. For learning. We're a small group, so you can just shout it out. Anyone have an idea for learning?
Wait, what was the question
The,
again?
What is assessment for learning?
the goal for assessment is to enhance learning.
Right, right. And so a, a common formative assessment is to assess learning as it's going along instead of a summative at the end. So keep that in mind as we move along here. Thank you. Oh, here we go. So let's just kind of do a compare here. So if you would, I'm going to pick on Jose. Jose, I'm going to say the first part. The assessment is created or chosen by, and then would you answer the classroom and common formative assessment for me as we move along? Okay, let's start. The assessment is created or chosen by.
The individual teacher,
All right. Or,
a collaborative team of teachers,
okay. So you're seeing the differences right there. Okay. The second one, the assessment is given to students. Jose.
to, to check for understanding and evaluate each lesson,
All right. In common.
regularly to assess the standard.
Okay. So we're looking at lesson and standard. Okay. The next one, the assessment provides feedback that.
Describes the student's comprehension of the lesson and informs students on their progress.
And common one.
Helps collaborative teams of teachers analyze and improve their instructional practice and inform students on their progress.
Okay, so we keep seeing the difference. One is classroom, teacher specific, one is more collaborative with teachers. Okay, the assessment results are used by the teacher to do what?
Guide decisions about next steps in lesson planning.
Mm-hmm. And comment?
Improve instructional practice and to give feedback to students on their practice.
All right. And the next, please. The
For
assessment
the,
data is used to, sorry, the assessment data is used to do what?
for a classroom, describe each individual student's attainment of skills or common, compare students' results, and identify best practices.
Perfect. And the last one, the assessment shows whether or not the student demonstrates.
For classroom, mastery of the lesson. For common formative assessment, mastery of the standard.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much, Jose. So we really can see the difference on this chart of the two types, one focusing on teachers specifically and one focusing on collaborative teachers collaborating with each other. Are there any questions about that? Okay, let's move on. We'll be doing lots of things about common formative assessments. Okay, so what I'd like you to do in your group is to kind of answer what you read about for your homework. So in group one, we're going to have two groups, group one and group two. You're going to have 20 minutes. You're going to be mixed up with your two agencies. And the first group will answer what is a common formative assessment and why is it critical to an effective PLC? The second group will answer the and what constitute, yeah. And then the second group, what are rubrics? Why are they essential to CFAs and PLCs? And how to construct them? And what should the second question would be, what should a PLC do with the results? And I believe this is on handout. You know what? I'm blocked there. Let me see if I can get you down to, oops, sorry.
I believe
Thank
it should
you,
be
Judy.
3.
Yes. Okay, so you look at handout 3, and that is where you'll put your answers. So if you choose someone that can write and someone report, that would really be helpful. So please get your handout, and we'll answer the questions, and you'll be divided in groups. And now that we know the breakout rooms are pretty easy to get to, if there's no questions, Catherine will go into one group and I'll go in the other group so we can help if you have any questions. All right, let's just go get into our breakout rooms, and then make sure you do have someone that's a scribe and someone that will report out.
Karen, you're muted.
All right. So I really enjoyed the conversations that my group had. So they will start. And if you would like to respond to questions, group 1, questions 1 and 2, go ahead. I believe it's who's responding to that? I think it was. I've lost a name. No, it's not Isabel. Angela, help me.
Oh, Eileen.
I was the
Eileen.
scribe, so I'm the one that has all the notes.
Yeah. So Eileen, I think
So,
you would
okay.
be best to answer
Okay.
also, since you can probably understand your notes, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All righty, go
And we
ahead.
Okay. Yes. And,
um,
team, feel free to jump in.
And please say your question first before you answer it, so we're all on board. And you can take notes, the other team. This is like an information gap. One person has the answers, and one person has questions, the other one has the answers. So, all right, go ahead. The jigsaw?
Okay. So I'm going to answer both of them, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is common formative assessment and why is it crucial to an effective PLC? What our group just met, and we had similar answers. So common formative assessment is a similar assessment within a PLC. It is a common assessment. It helps us understand students' progress and to evaluate student learning within the PLC. And it gives the team a common starting point and a common way to evaluate student progress. So if any of my team would like to elaborate on any of that, or if we have questions from the group.
I think that was a good summary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our second question, what are recommended steps for developing common formative assessments, and how can PLCs become more skilled at developing them? It is basically, it's like a process of refinement and refining the assessment itself. The value in that is that it has the teachers work together to create an authentic assessment. So as the team reviews student work and student outcomes from one of the formative assessments, then they get back together and decide, where's the student need? So what do we do next? So it's kind of guides your instructional practice. So the process of refinement is the value. It's important that there is flexibility within the pacing of the unit so that the team, once they see results, they might need to go back to revisit certain areas of need where students didn't quite meet the standard. It's important and it's valuable to document the entire process. So to keep all the PLC planning documents and notes so that the team can go back to refer to the process that went through for the development and the analysis of the outcomes of the assessment. And there's also value in reviewing the student work together so that those outcomes support the planning in terms of which scaffolds were successful or what scaffolds the team might want to try, depending on maybe another teacher had good success with their students in a particular area. So there's discussion about which scaffolds to use, how often to use them, when to take them away. And it's also important and valuable to understand the roles within a PLC so that the work is divided amongst the team so that all members can share responsibility in the actual work of the tasks. So who's going to create it? Are you going to do it digitally, or do you have paper? Like, who's going to make the copies? Like, all of that. So the actual work involved. And that's what we talked about. Good conversation.
Yeah, it was an excellent conversation. And thank you so much. Okay, so if there's no questions about questions number 1 and 2, we'll go on to group 2. Group 2 will answer the question, what are rubrics? Why are they essential to CFAs and PLCs? And how do we construct them? And the second question would be, what should a PLC do with the results of CFAs? So whoever was writing down your group answers, perhaps you would be the person to share them with our group.
Hi, everyone. So I was a scribe for my group. Like Eileen said, if anyone in my group wants to chime in, please chime in. So for the first question, what we got from the discussion for number 1 was a rubric is a scoring guide that is leveled and made up of specific criteria, and it serves as a guide for students and teachers. And then we dived into how to construct. So we created like an outline from our discussion. We talked about picking a standard amongst your PLC group, then unpacking the standard, then creating the learning goals, and then, like Eileen said earlier, peer review and edit, so that it goes through a couple of rounds of different teachers, and that leads into like the second question. So CFAs, we said that CFAs help educators see if students are learning what they are supposed to learn. And then we said that the CFAs help educators pivot to support students in their learning. And the results can assist educators with noticing patterns, challenges, and sharing perspectives to adjust instruction.
All right. Any other comments about why rubrics are essential and what should a PLC do with the results? All right. So great answers for these 2 questions, because we're going to dive into more about CFAs. And let me tell you, a CFA is the heart of a professional learning community. That is the heart, because that heart is looking at student learning in a collaborative way so that you have equity. If Eileen is teaching, say, an ESL class and we have the same level, we can make a common formative assessment to make sure that our students are learning, and if if we need to pivot, like you said, Jose, in one class. But the course outline should also align with that, because if we don't have similar objectives during our instruction, then it's going to be pretty hard to have a CFA that is equitable, meaning that we have the same lessons that are moving forward, not the instruction, but the lesson objectives. That's why we unpack the standard. All right, so let's move on and let's take a look at, and how's our timeline, Sudie? I don't want to go over anything.
You're doing okay so far.
Okay, you just chime in if I'm not. So this is a great example of what you've been talking about, at least in the group that I was with. And if you look at this chart, it may be a little confusing, but I'll give you an example afterwards that we do at our school. So we have priority standards, whatever standards you have chosen at your school. It could be one standard, two standards, whatever. And then as we know, we unpack or unwrap the concepts and skills. We went through the big ideas and essential questions last session, in which we want to ask a question. Why are we even learning this? And then students at the end of the lesson will come up, oh, I know why. And then what are our learning intentions and success criteria? So this will happen is, well, what do you expect students to are able to do? And then you'll see there's a post CFA and a pre CFA. So take a look at the arrow and you'll see pre CFA. And I think a lot of you were alluding to, well, we got to prepare this. We got to get together and decide what is it that we're going to assess. So that data, whether it be CASAS, classroom data, whatever data you gather at your school, that will enable you to decide what one priority standard or many priority standards you want to undertake. And then you teach, and then you teach again in this particular model, and then you see that mid-unit team check-in. That is your PLC. You kind of check that to see, okay, how are students going along? How are you're assessing students, and did the assessment work? Hmm? And then you continue on to the post CFA. I'd like to share what we do at our school. I think it has more meaning than just this abstract here. So when we gather in the beginning of our school year, we start with our units, and we're divided into a quarter system. So every quarter we teach 3 units, and our quarters are 12 weeks. So we have 3. We really have 4 weeks for each unit, and 4 times 3 is 12, right? So what happens is we make a calendar. I'm going to make sure that we have a calendar for each week, and teachers know, oh, this is unit 6. They know the title, like this unit, if we're ESL, this unit is housing, and we're going to do housing. They'll see, oh, January, for example, I can actually say, okay, week 1, we're doing around town. Week 2, we're still in around town, but we're going to start at EL Civics. So that's in the calendar. Then week 9, because we're doing January 26th, we're still on around town. Then on week 10, the 4th week, we have a PLC meeting. And we already know what our CFA was because we did a pre-CFA. So then we bring in our student work, whatever that was, and we bring in the CFA. Usually, so we have 3 weeks. We want it to be that CFA. We're doing writing. So the third week, we give the writing CFA. Then we bring it in on Monday, the fourth week, if you kind of get my rationale here. And so then we look at student work. Did the rubric work? Did the common form assessment work? What is the results? And that's what our PLC meeting is about. What were the results of that pre-CFA? Is it working? Do we need to adjust it? What did you do? My students didn't do so well. What were your best practices? And so that whole time we're looking at student work, best practices, because we're learning what students need to know, and we're learning from each other what we need to improve in an instruction. So we do that every fourth week on each. So then we look back and we say, okay, do we need to adjust the CFA, or is this working? For us, our rubric, our CFA is working. We're doing writing. So we just continue with the same one. And then, so it's writing. So then we look at the fourth week, we have a PLC, and we do the same thing. And then we have a post. And that post CFA is the target is proficiency, huh? So is everyone proficient? So within a quarter, we have taken the writing standard one, or is it two, and making sure that all students are proficient within that quarter in that particular writing. If we do speaking and listening, it's different, but we still have that calendar, and we know what standards we are assessing. So I can't tell you how important it is to have a calendar so that students know, or teachers know, what is the process that we're going to go through for this quarter? What are the units? When are we having a PLC meeting? Are we starting EL Civics during this time? So that depending on how if you're quarter, semester, or just year long, that you have an ongoing calendar where you pre-assess your students. How are students doing when you get them? And it depends also on open enrollment, if it's managed enrollment. So these are things you have to adjust to. But I guess what I want to leave you with this is that you really develop a calendar so teachers know exactly what units you're teaching and when you're assessing. We have a course outline that goes along with ventures. So all of our course outline, teachers are not guessing what lesson objectives that we need to teach each quarter. It's not everything they need to teach, but the standards they need to teach are in our course outline. And they even have the page number and everything, so they know how they teach it. That's all right, whatever processes and instruction they use. But a guaranteed curriculum, we kind of talked about that. We call our guaranteed curriculum a course outline. So we're guaranteeing that each level teaches these certain learning objectives. Any question about that, or we can talk about it in coaching also. So
I have a question. So is the post CFA, is it kind of like CASAS has the same questions, or they're testing the same thing but with a different question, or is it the same actual
no, it's
task?
not the same.
It's a different task.
Yeah, the tasks are always changed at each PLC.
Mm-hmm.
Say you're doing reading, it'll be a different reading every 4 weeks. If we were testing, let's say, main idea and details, for example. First time, we'd have one reading, second time, a different reading. But the CFA can stay the same.
Yeah, so Karen, I think the answer to his question is yes. The CFA stays the same, but the content
Okay.
is what you
Change.
would switch. But you're
Okay,
still
the contents.
using the same assessment.
Is that, does that answer, Eric?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Okay, any other questions? All righty, so we're going to continue. So, as you all said, this is kind of a quick summary. Teachers, what are common formative assessments provide this? Timely information. You don't wait until you've taught the whole quarter and then say, oh my goodness, they didn't learn it. It provides information to teachers on the teaching and learning process. So this is built-in staff development right there. Information that helps teacher adjust instruction to improve student learning. And that's your inquiry and what's happening in this class and that class, and then feedback to students on their learning. And you'll notice on the rubrics that you develop that you can actually give real-time feedback to students so they're aware of their learning and where their gaps are. Okay, and the quality of common formative assessments. Collaboratively developed, not one person says, hey, what do you think? Everyone collaborates and decides how this CFA is going to be given. They're aligned with essential standards. So you have to choose what standards you're going to be working on. Clearly identified learning objectives in the standards. You unpack the standards so you know exactly what learning objectives you want to target. It gives feedback to teachers to analyze and improve their instruction. You get data. You actually know if students are successful or where they need to improve and if they become proficient. So for writing, by the end of the year, we are managed enrollment. So we have a cadre of students. We can see by the end of the year how proficient all these classes were. And then allow students the opportunity to address their results. So you're giving them feedback and thinking about, hey, you could do this and this will improve your writing or your reading or your speaking and listening. So, designing a common formative assessment. We don't have to go crazy on this. They just have to be common. So it doesn't have to take amount of time and you're going, oh, is this good? What's important? Is it assessing the target? What is it you want to assess? If it's assessing narrative writing, then you know exactly, okay, that's the target. Is it assessing main idea and key details? Okay, then your assessment assesses that, not comprehension of the reading, but can they pull out the main idea? Can they pull out of a reading the actual details? If they can do that, they can comprehend the reading, right? Okay, and so then you have to choose a method. How is this going to be? Is it going to be multiple choice? Are you going to have in a multiple choice? You can actually analyze in multiple choice. Is this the main idea or is this the main idea? And people have to start using critical thinking. And then, of course, you have to design a rubric, and then which is designed on that particular standard at that particular level. And then you design a rubric and create an assessment. So hopefully we can give examples of how to do this as we move along. And please interrupt anytime to ask.
Yeah, I have a thought that I'm just kind of anticipating, looking ahead, and we are not really a community adult school in the sense that we're not just serving one community. We're a college that spans, like 20 miles across the city and very different student populations. So we have in, one location, we have in level one, the same level, they might be like the spouse of a postdoctoral student at UCSD who also has a PhD back in their country, whereas on another campus we have asylum seekers who have like 2 years of education. And so in that part, the adjust part, the interpret and adjust part, I'm anticipating faculty saying, well, my students are different. And I'm trying to think like how to approach that context that we're in for this particular aspect of the flow, the adjust part.
Well, if you look at level one with people with a background of a doctorate and things, they will not last. In my experience, their language attainment is much quicker. And
Yeah.
we have hardly anyone in level one. They're usually literacy or beginning level. And that means beginning level most likely in their first language as they are in learning to acquire the language. So it depends on how you are going to group these students. I know that when they take the CASAS test, for example, they would not be in level one if they have a doctorate. They may say, I want to begin at the beginning, but
Yeah,
anything else?
they could be if they might be they might score high on the reading test and very low on the speaking
That's right.
on speaking assessment, and they might say, or our placement office might say, well, okay, your CASA score is level 3, but you can't even answer the question when I ask you what your address is. So I'm gonna, the, I mean that's I'll grant you this isn't very that common with us, but it's kind of just the point of faculty saying, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter. They say, well, my students are different, and so whatever. Okay, so they don't pass, and it's I'm doing the same things this other faculty is doing at the level, but my students are very, very different, and so um, is that does that matter in this process or not?
Karen, can I
I
say
don't,
something?
yeah, sure.
So I think we're kind of skipping a step. We're not skipping a step, but I just want to remind us of a step. Before we're doing the CFA and before we're deciding on how we're teaching this and doing this with our students, we are looking at data to figure out what are the essential standards and skills we should be focusing on. So whatever your CFA ends up focused on should be applicable to all the students, even though they vary. So in my case, for example, I was CTE. We were all singleton teachers, but we landed on reading and critical thinking because that was where our industry certification gaps were. So you want to look at your assessment data and figure out where are the gaps that are consistent across all of our students, then identify the essential standards and skills you want to focus on, then develop your CFA. And remember, this is all happening collaboratively with these teachers. So they're helping to decide on these things. So by the time you get to CFA point, it shouldn't be, well, my students are different because this group of students is, has a high level of education elsewhere and this student didn't, because you've already done the pre-work to figure out what are the commonalities between those groups of students. Does that make sense?
Well, what if they say there are no commonalities or there are not enough
There
commonalities?
usually
Definitely are commonalities. They just have to
Okay.
look at the data.
Eric, do you use the CASAS test?
Yeah, we use the causes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just throwing out hypotheticals
Yeah,
just
I know.
because of the nature of our program and the culture of our program. And the
Mhm.
way that our faculty don't do anything in common almost. I mean, they will say, "Oh, here's this great lesson," and they'll post it on Pronto. But in terms of assessment, no, right? And they're all off on their own. And part of it is that they might say, well, I don't know if this, maybe this process might, I don't know how I fit into this process if a lot of the other students at the same level, that we're teaching are, they face totally different needs. And so, you know, I guess what I'm thinking could happen is that they'll say, well, all right, well, your students need to do this, but my students need to do that. So what do we choose?
So, the word you said, culture, I think that is the big change that has to happen
Yeah, it
in
is. Yeah.
colleges. Before you change, you got to work on collaboration no matter what and change the culture of how you're going to address PLC. So I think changing the culture should be your emphasis. How do you work together on anything before you even dive into trying to do CFAs and things like that, or even deciding on a standard? What is your culture? How can we change this culture to be collaborative instead of everybody wheeling in their own wheelhouse?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Challenge.
Culture eats policy for breakfast. And the the what tends to happen is that we will have professional development meetings where people will share ideas, and some people will take something from it and some won't, but everyone kind of goes back to do their own thing. And so it's, and I think that that's part of the, I mean, there's reasons for that. I mean, and some, I'm not saying they're even, they might not be good. Maybe there's some good aspects or there's some, maybe it's not to be, well, it's to be expected. So, that is the culture that we have, is kind of like, well, I need to do things my way because these are my students.
Yeah, so I think that, Angela, you have your hand raised. How about giving Eric your ideas?
Yeah, I think the the fact that this process involves data analysis at every step is really useful for that because performance is performance. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter, if you have 2 years of education or 20 years of education. What can you do? And so if you're looking at the data across different programs and the data shows that these students are needing help in certain areas, the data is going to be similar, no matter what the student backgrounds are. So I think when you're
Yes.
looking at a culture shift, really focusing on the data and not, what the class is composed of, who the people are, can help in that
Mhm.
progress.
And that's providing we interpret the data in the same way, because data is only as good as your model of interpretation.
And so I suggest if you use CASAS as your data, then learn a lot about CASAS because it's not through interpretation. They actually give you the answer.
But CASAS is only reading,
Yes, they have speaking and listening.
but
They
we don't
also
we
do,
don't we don't pay for that, so we don't get it.
Well,
uh,
well, you don't have to. It can be cost. It's a good starting point, but you can
yeah,
use
there's
classroom
other
data,
ways.
etc. But this is also why we have the data-driven protocol so that we can develop shared meaning of the data, and we do that activity to, move our assumptions out of the way. We get that out the door first. What are we thinking just going in? Let's talk about that. Now, what's the data actually showing us, and what are we gleaning from this? And we have that in a group conversation so that we can all be on the same page. So when we start asking the question, like, what do we have in common across our students? And it's also important when you're doing that, if you can, to anonymize the data so that they're not looking at their particular student. They're looking at the groups of students because that takes that bias out of it, that anticipate that confirmation bias and that type of thing where we're like, see, I knew my students needed that, but your students need this. If we're looking at anonymous numbers and we're just looking at our students all across level one, like the example you use, and we're looking for what's the commonality here, what's the common thread, that makes it easier for us to all develop shared meaning and takes out that
Mhm.
idea of my students versus your students. And instead, we're looking at the collective our students. But I'm really, really glad you're asking these questions here, Eric, because this is exactly, I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but this is where we workshop these ideas so we can talk about and have these conversations. But that's why protocols are so helpful in a PLC context because it helps us formalize what we're doing and focus on what we're doing and taking like the other stuff out of the equation and develop true shared meaning of what we're really seeing. But we can't get to the CFA point, the common formative assessment point, if we haven't started
Sure.
building trust, building relationships, and building that culture of collaboration. So that's where that like real meat work is happening there. Once you've built that culture up and start doing these type of activities to help build that culture, help develop that shared meaning, then by the time you get to this step, it's much easier because you've already kind of identified those places. But I think it's a good thing that you're asking that question so you can really think through how do I avoid getting into that rut?
Yeah, and it's not. I don't mean to diss COSMIC. I mean, I've been thinking
It
for a
doesn't,
while.
you're among friends. It doesn't give you everything that you that you want. I
Right. I
know.
mean, but I've been thinking for a while now. It's where we need to start because
Yeah.
we can aggregate that data.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We never we I don't think in my 15 years here we've never used the data in an aggregated way. Um, and I'm very curious to get it. I'm always downloading the CASAS data and pulling it into spreadsheets. I'm not even using Tops Pro, just using my own data
Yeah.
analysis to see how what's going on. Uh, uh, and so I look forward to at least getting started with that CASAS data. And also there is, of course, there's a correlation between reading and writing that, to a certain degree anyway. But
Yeah.
what and now that we're using um, we're using steps now is going to help a lot.
It will really help you, Eric. Our teachers are learning about how to, using a protocol, how to interpret their CASAS reports individually with each student besides the group. So it's a um, baby steps along until all of a sudden everybody gets it. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah,
So
right now our faculty just look at the scaled score. That's it, and they're not looking at like, well, what is the which particular competencies are the students not
yeah.
getting? They don't do that.
Well, yeah. And so they're missing out. They're missing out on not only the competency, but the content. What skills are the
Hmm.
students unable to perform? If you just take reading and start, that is an easier way because you actually have data. We also give a speaking and listening that we created in our school because we know there's a problem with that. We get high readers, but they, as you say, they can't, you ask them a question, they can't answer it. All right. I'm going to move along. Thank you, Eric, for sharing your questions. And I'm sure everybody is thinking all about this. So it really makes us open up our minds and think about our specific agency.
And I know we need to move on. I just want to say, I was going to say what Sudi mentioned about anonymizing the data. That's one of the best things you can do. I feel like for us, that was incredibly important just from the get-go. Is we don't put the name of the teacher or the level on it. We just say class A, class B, class C, and so forth. And that's hugely helpful to move towards our students, not my students.
All right. Okay, here we go. So here's some of the targets. Do you want students to knowledge mastery, reasoning proficiency, skills, or ability to create products? So that's something you have to think about when you're actually creating the CFA. And then these are usually some of the methods that can happen for these targets. A selected response, we know that, but it can be just not um, multiple choice, but you can compare and contrast in answers, even at a literacy level. Is this story about, and then they have to choose two things, and they're just starting to read, or they have a picture and they just see two pictures. So it can be used in many, many ways for selected response. Reasoning proficiency, you're already doing reasoning just by showing two pictures and they have to choose between two pictures. Reasoning could also be inferences. Reasoning could be when you do a speaking and listening and you're doing role playing. They have to think about what's the answer. So skills, um, all the skills that we're trying to teach in reading, writing, speaking, and listening in the standards. we can use any type of these assessments. Right now, we have our advanced level is doing extended written responses, where our literacy is doing a very short response for writing. But we're scaffolding that all along, and we're seeing this is where we want to get to extended written. So we're scaffolding that at each level. And the ability to create products. I've been in schools where they make a recipe or they have a cookbook and they want everyone to create a cookbook, or you're doing cooperative learning where everyone's going to create a poster for certain thing and each person takes this and they have an performance assessment, huh? They can actually, or we have in our course outline after every unit, people have to give we call it an oral report about something that they have learned in that unit and they prepare that and that's a performance, or it's a role play and that could be performance. So I think the most important, what are you targeting for your CFAs and what's the method? And so real quick, when you think about what assessment method you use for knowledge mastery? Off the top of your head, can anyone give a response? What are you using for knowledge mastery, the knowledge of something, whether it be whatever, ESL? We have the nursing program here. What kind of assessment do you use for mastery? Anyone?
Would you use a common formative assessment? Oh, actually, does it have to be an activity?
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to assess something, their knowledge? It doesn't have to be anything that we spoke about, but it could be, like selected response. How do you do it as in your classroom? Let's look at it that way. So how do you know people know what they're supposed to learn? How do you assess them?
It depends on, I think, the class in some ways, but it could be a combination between skills demonstration, skills presentation, discussion. It could be a written test.
All right.
But for mastery, the demonstration, I think, is whatever demonstration that is, either skills demonstration or creating a project.
All right. And Eileen says a rubric for writing could show us the mastery of that knowledge, especially for writing, huh? Okay.
I do, for example, sometimes like role playings, like when they are like they already we practice different things and then they make a role play and they complete like in the role they need to answer according to the vocabulary, the question they were learning during that topic.
Okay.
When students do oral reports, for me, the real assessment of knowledge mastery is after when they're done and they take questions.
Yeah. All right.
Because if they can take questions that are spontaneous and they're not rehearsed, they can't rehearse an answer because they don't know what questions are going to come up. That shows mastery.
Okay. And it shows people are paying attention and understanding what they're saying. Huh?
I could share something.
Sure.
So, for example, I use a lot of Kahoot with the lower level. So when I put something that I want to know if they already mastered the concept, for example, and then if they're able to score it, I could see on their phones if they got the right answer or no. So it's a kind of a assessment.
All right. A good check for understanding, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say don't sleep on Kahoot. I use it frequently, and you can see reports. Their name is attached to it. You can see exactly which questions they were correct or incorrect. Yeah, it's a great tool.
And it's fun, and adults like to have fun in class too.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
I think,
Yes. Mhm.
yeah. And they like to know if they're right or wrong. Immediate feedback.
Yes, it's right on their screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Kahoot is a great tool. If you don't use it, check Catherine. She uses it all the time.
Yes, and the one of the great things is that it's essentially an assessment that feels like a game. So when it's gamified, something switches in our brains.
Mhm. Okay, so for reasoning proficiency. So reasoning, reasoning is, you analyze information, infer meaning, solve problems. What kind of assessments do you use? They're more, reasoning is looking not only at language, but more the proficiency of can they problem solve or infer using a new language. So you're teaching inferences, but you're also teaching language at the same time, and that can be a real challenge for students. Inferences, I know teachers in the school that I'm at always are saying, oh, this is such a hard concept, especially in intermediate, low, and beyond to get inferences. So, what kind of things do you use?
Karen, I really like Isabel's answer, the
I
class
didn't
companion
see that.
AI for writing feedback. And part of the reason why I like it is because if your students are using any form of AI tool, we also need them to be able to verify the validity of what they're utilizing, right? And so it helps them use those critical thinking skills to look at, is what the AI telling me accurate? Does it make sense? How can I find out? How
Yeah.
can I be sure? And in our CTE classroom, I taught technology and coding. And so having my students not only demonstrate to me what they're coding and what they're doing, but explaining it simultaneously, I found was not only great for my native English speakers, but for my non-native English speakers as well to practice their language skills.
Yeah, and for analysis, it's a great tool to teach. Is this true? Is this not true? Where's this information coming from? Because we all need this now. Okay, great. Thank you, Sudi. All right, and let's look at another. And this is in your classroom. What assessment method do you use to assure skill attainment? Are you teaching skills in your classroom? That might be the question.
Is it
Uh,
students' ability to apply that skill to uh different content?
Sure
Uh,
is.
Yeah, task-based assignment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A task, huh? Can they use that skill to do something? Or do they even know what the skill is? So we have at our school we're teaching academic vocabulary, So main idea, key details, inferences. We're not assuming because they can answer a question that they know what a main idea is, that they know what a key detail is, that they know inferences, if they know analyze, if they know the word compare and contrast. All of this academic vocabulary is within the standards, and we need to teach them. Those are skills, and they're academic. We can't just look at life skill that they know the vocabulary of life skills. We need to really try to ensure that whatever skills they're learning, that they're transferable for lifelong learning and not just specific to a competency.
Yes, that's such a great description. I would just something that I find with I always teach the lower levels just because of my experience and education and it really helps me to understand I'm not just teaching them to read these few sentences and then be able to answer a couple questions just by word matching, right? So moving beyond that and helping them understand that a reading skill isn't about just finding a word from the text that matches the question I'm being asked. That's really helpful for me to think about that.
Yeah, it's just not the answer. Not trying to get the answer. It's
Right.
more developing the skill. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'm wondering, like, for example, what I do also is one of the parts that the students learn is like a personal information that they use it, and since most of my students are immigrants, so we show them like they use for many places like immigration, when you go to the doctor, when you go to the library. So we use different formats to fill out in different situations. Like for sometimes I have like Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. They fill out some information that I make an example that they are receiving a link from a place to fill out their information. If that would be like part of this question.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, any way in which you can assess them if they understand what they're getting. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, what assessment method do you use to verify your students' ability to create products? Anyone do this in their class? Used to be very common when I was teaching, but I don't see anyone right now. Yes, I do see someone with posters. I remember a class at the school I work at that they created a poster. I don't remember what the title was. It was something about what was that about? I can't think of it, but maybe you can help me as my brain is thinking. Does anyone create products as like a collaborative learning or cooperative learning? Catherine, do you in your class? What do you do?
Yeah, so as you're mentioning with cooperative learning structures, there are two really, really great ones that can help you with creating products. So there's the gallery walk method, and then a similar like carousel brainstorm. So in a gallery walk, the groups create a poster. And in the carousel brainstorm, there's you've got posters where there's a prompt or something, and each group is kind of rotating, answering the same questions. And I found that students in across programs really enjoy those two methods. I've done them in ESL, I've done them in CTE, like in office assistant type things where students made a product, they made like their CV or resume, and we put them up and did a gallery walk, and students were able to comment and make suggestions. And they're so great because they're still cooperative in the sense that they're all creating the same product, but it's also getting them just up out of their seat. And sometimes just that location change can also really incentivize students.
Alfredo, you have a question?
No, I was
Comment?
thinking about Catherine, like the activity. Sometimes for as I usually teach level one, so they are really learning. And for them, most of their fears is to speak in front of people. So what I try to help them is to do small practices during the semester, but in at the end of the semester, I ask them to, and I ask who wants to do it because I don't wanna like force them to do something that I try to pursue them to make a like a big poster. If they can do even on Microsoft on PowerPoint, or they have on the wall, and I told them you can have pictures and some words, and then you can show us about. Sometimes it's about they wanna go on a trip, about their life, their hobbies, and that helps them to feel that they can speak and show and gain confidence on speaking in a safe place, because in the end it's their same classmates. They are the same friends, so they feel more, so they can do something. And I feel like for them it was reaching something that they didn't feel they could do it before.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
and
great.
just I would just say remember that the list that Karen gave us, when we get to creating a product, that's really at the top of Bloom's taxonomy there. So that's I would say that's true mastery there.
All right. Thank you, Catherine, and
Right,
thank you.
Karen, hate to rush you, but we are over time, so we need to move through these
Okay.
next
All
couple.
right. All right. We'll just go for it then. So we know that there's selected response. We know that it's, select the correct or best response provided, multiple choice, true, false, matching, short answer. I would suggest to try to get some critical thinking into this and just not a response. Constructed written response, we know that that's answering questions. Perhaps in the book that we use, even in the low levels, there is some comparison and analyzing, even though it's difficult for students. So that could be a way of adding that into your class and describing a detail, things like that. So a written response does not just have to be writing a narrative. All right. You can analyze, you can problem solve, you can explain, at work, I first do this, second this, third this, fourth. Very important to add this kind of, because this is a higher level Bloom's taxonomy that sometimes we are just reporting information and not really learning these skills. All right, I'll move right along, Sudi. I can just tell you're anticipating that our time is short here. Okay. Did I do it all? And then performance, we have, a product and you're making a judgment. You actually perform, or term paper, a report, or a resume, anything like that. And then we have personal communication, which I think we do a lot in ESL. People talking with each other, and you can actually assess them as they talk with each other and see what their skills are, especially if it's on a certain topic or a certain learning, a certain objective. And then I think if you have time, journal writing is a great way to learn about your students. You ask a question and then collect the journal once a week or something like that. It's a great way to get to know your students. So remember, you have this information. So when you're getting to common formative assessments, this is a great place to review this. Okay, so remember that we started, would you all look at handout 5 for me? Here we go. And this is the route we were taking to actually get to our common formative assessment. And then Catherine will take you through rubrics. But remember, we looked at a standard. This was the one that we showed you. And we unpacked the standard. Then if you notice, after unpacking, we actually have the lesson objectives, right? We unpack them, we put the lesson objectives together. We kind of look, this is a beginning level, so the depth of knowledge was a 1. And then we actually looked at big ideas and essential questions. What is a main idea? And then students would come up with these answers at the big idea at the end of the lesson. And so now we're going to look at you're going to have to learn to create a common formative assessment. So I'd like to go back to that. Sue, do you want to come back? And I just wanted to show that trip before we got into common and formative assessments. This is an example of a beginning level. The target was the skills of personal communication, and it's really a skill in reading. And they're going to read 2 informational texts. One student reads one, another student reads the other, and then they exchange these questions. What is the key? What is the topic? How do you know? What is the evidence? They can point out, this is why this is the topic, and then the details and what's the evidence. And so, of course, one of the academic words has to be taught, evidence, huh? So that is taught in your lesson somewhere when you actually have been teaching reading as we go along in your actual lesson assessments. Remember, this is common formative. And then teachers got together, then they reverse it. In the second reading, students B will question about the topic and students A will answer. And the teacher listens and she'll have a rubric to see how well that each student performed. So that could be a common formative assessment. And you could take it also to a written answer response because these words, use these words to ask and answer questions about the reading topic. And so now you could ask, they could actually ask questions and write it down. So first it would be verbal, and then you could actually target it to writing the answers, ask a question, and cite the evidence. And why this, I remember including this in, is because they were practicing is and are. So we're also looking at language and how they can actually ask the question and cite the evidence. So this is a common formative assessment that you can refer back to see, okay, it was a skill, we were construction written answer, and now we are actually have these answers, and then the rubric, which Catherine will help you with, can actually see how well students attain this particular assessment. And so then you see that we have this template, which you will be able to fill out towards the end of the session. All right, I think that's a wrap, right, Sudi? Did we make it?
Not really, but I'll catch us up.
Okay. Sorry, it was such
so
good conversation.
it really was, and I don't like to rush us along. We're having good
Yeah,
dialogue.
especially
So
when
thank
people
you.
responding.
So
Okay,
before we jump into Catherine guiding us through putting all of this together, we're going to take a brief moment to talk about rubrics.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So rubrics help us to scaffold learning and progression, as you all, as group 2 read earlier. They're designed to kind of go from simpler content to the more complex content, or from what does it mean if they're not able to do this? What does it mean to be proficient? And what does it mean if they're advanced, if you will? It helps us to articulate the distinct levels of knowledge that we expect students to have and skills relevant to the specific standard. So we understand that not every student, when we initially assess them, is always going to be at the exact same spot. So rubrics help us understand where each of our students are by assessing it that way. And then the rubrics help us to engage students regarding development and use of the rubric. The students know and can follow that rubric. Remember, the rubric isn't just for us as a scoring tool. It's also for the students to understand what is expected. What does proficiency look like? What does it look like if I'm a little bit more advanced? What does it look like if I'm not quite there? So helping the students really understand. That's the real purpose in there. And bonus points, it gives us data to use, right? So we're going to use the Marzano rubric, and you'll see that there's a Marzano rubric template included on that template that Karen was just talking about. And so when we look at what this looks like at the top level, which is a level 4, and this is a 5-point rubric from 4 to 0. Some people don't like using zeros, and you don't have to. You can take this and make it your own. Use it whatever works best for you and your student. We're using the classic Marzano way for this demonstration purposes. So if they are at a level 4, that means in addition to being able to exhibit level 3 performance, and level 3 is typically proficient, the student response demonstrates in-depth inference and application that goes beyond what was taught. So remember when we were talking about our DOK levels and objectives, and we said for students who might be more advanced, look to the next level standard up. That's where that next level up would be reflected in your rubric at level 4. Now, level 3, that should be proficient. The student response demonstrates no major errors or omissions regarding any of the information and or processes. So they can do the thing proficiently, whatever the standard or skill may be. 2 is slightly below that. The student response indicates major errors or omissions regarding more complex ideas and processes. However, they do indicate major errors or omissions relative to simpler details and processes. That basically means the student is almost there, but there's still some mistakes happening. This might be the student can do it with teacher help and support, but they can't do it on their own type of thing. They understand it, but they need a little bit more extra help, so they're not quite proficient yet. Now, we dropped down to number 1, the student provides responses that indicate a distinct lack of understanding of the knowledge. That means they can't do it even with our help. We are still needing, but they do kind of understand the concept. They just can't do it yet. When we get down to 0, the student provides literal no response. Even with help, the student does not exhibit a partial understanding of the knowledge. If they're at 0, that means they can't do it. They don't understand it. They're not there yet. If they're at a 0, they probably weren't ready to be assessed in the first place, if we're being honest. But sometimes we do need, like Karen mentioned earlier, those pre-CFAs to figure out where our students actually are. So if we're not sure if our students are there yet, we do that CFA and then we collect them back. And if we have a bunch of 0s or 1s, we're not ready to assess the standard yet. We really need to teach this a lot more, right? All right, let's look at this and an example that some might find a little yucky. And we're going to play a game here. All right, so you're going to use your chat, so make sure you have the chat available. And I love this example because we get to blame the yuckiness on cute little creatures. All right, so what I want you to do, I'm going to describe the item and I want you to tell me where this animal falls on our rubric, where you think they might fall. All right, so the first one, the items stick to the shelves when they're picked up. They smell lingers longer after the refrigerator is closed. Several items need to be thrown out. If my proficiency is my refrigerator is reasonably clean, where do you think this would be on our rubric? This is the kitten. The kitten stuff sticks to the shelf. Smells are lingering. Where is our kitten on a 0 to it? Eileen said a kitten's a 0. She said, that kitten is nasty. There's 0 on the rubric. Isabel said 0 to 1. Okay, let's go down to the sloth. Let's see how the sloth is doing. Y'all judge the kitten really harshly. Let's look at the sloth. Some shells are wiped clean, others have some crusty spots. Okay. There's some bad smells, but items are in containers, but there seems to be some green stuff in the containers. Angela's face. Where is the sloth? No, this one is, they can't all be 0s, Isabel. Isabel said this is a 0. Eileen gave this one a 2. Al gave this one a 1. Okay, all right. So let's keep going. Let's see what's going on with our little baby duck here, with our little chick. The inside and the outside of the refrigerator is filthy. Few items are in containers. Everything needs to be thrown out. Where? Okay, a lot of 0s on this one. All right. Isabella's like exclamation. So this is a super duper 0. She's like, for real this time, this one is a 0. All right. Okay. I think we're all in agreement that that's a 0. Poor duck. We've got our baby elephant. The entire refrigerator is sparkling and smells clean. All items are fresh. All containers have lids. Containers are organized and they're in categories. Yeah, we've got a couple of 3s and mostly 4s. Isabel's like, they got 100%. These are perfect. I'm so curious what Isabella's score is at this point. Isabella is like really judgy about people's refrigerators. All right, last one. This is for our puppy. The refrigerator is wiped clean. All items are relatively fresh in some type of container with some lids missing. Smells of some food, but notice nothing was green and it's not stinky this time. Where do we put this one? A 3. -3. Alfredo. Isabel said nah.
Sorry, it was 3, not -3.
Okay. Isabella said about 3. Isabel, you're my favorite person in this activity with ever. This is hilarious. All right.
I'm a little bit of a harsh grader.
So our baby elephant.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking, I don't know if I want to be in her class.
I don't know if I want Isabel to see my refrigerator. That's how I'm feeling right
I just set really high expectations for my students, okay?
and their refrigerators. Yes. All right. So the baby elephant was our 4. The baby elephant was that one right there, that the refrigerator was sparkly. You guys got that right. Our puppy was 3. You guys have that right too. It smells of some food, but it's pretty clean. Our elephant and our puppy are doing pretty great. Now let's get to the other ones. Baby sloth, that was a 2. We know Isabel gave it a 0, but we gave that one a 2. Kitten was a 1. Kitten was the 1. The kitten was the one that had, some stuff sticking to the shelves, and you accurately reflected that chick, that really nasty chick with the inside and outside dirty, was definitely a 0. So good job, team, at assessing that. So when we think about the steps to creating a rubric, we first want to examine the standard and the objectives. What were the objectives we were expecting our students to meet? Then you want to determine the type of assessment you're going to do. Start with the first criterion in describing what's the high end. Like, what does it mean if our students not only are proficient, but they can supersede this? Like, what does that look like? And then work that way back. And then describe the low end. What does it look like if our students can't do this at all? And make sure you have agreement on those two spaces and then fill in the rest of them. And then you want to fill in 3 and 2 on the rubric. Now you do have a rubric template that's in your handouts on handout 8. It's the same handout that has your unpacking standard, your essential questions, your objectives, along with your CFA, and then your rubric template. That's all in one little space there for you in handout number 8. So an example we have here, and this is connected to our CCRS Anchor 1 that we talked about earlier and that Karen was showing. And I'm going to go back to the handout also because I like to do that as well. Oh, I went too far. We said that if they don't show any understandings, that means that they cannot complete the assessment. So we gave them a 0 if they just simply couldn't do it. Now notice we didn't say a 0 because they were absent. We said a 0 because they weren't able to complete the assessment. Then on the number 1, does not meet, we said they can ask and answer about the text with teacher prompting. So the teacher has to really help them along. On number 2, nearly meets proficiency. They can ask and answer questions about details in the text, but it's not consistent. So they know some parts of the text, but they're not really familiar with other parts of the text. Maybe, did they finish reading all of it? My sparse of questions there. Number 3, meets proficiency. They can ask and answer questions about details in the text consistently. And then the next level up, they can not only ask and answer questions about the text, but they can also say who, what, when, where, and why about the details in the text. And that's the next level up in the standards. So that's the example that goes along with the CFA that Karen shared with us earlier. Now, when we think about quality indicators for informative assessment that connects with our rubric, we want to think, was the assessment collaboratively developed? Did we do this together? Did we choose this together? Are we in agreement? The assessment is aligned to your essential standard that you've identified. The assessment is tied tightly and clearly identified learning objectives with the essential standard. So all these things scaffold and flow together. And then lastly, the assessment is formative in nature. It informs us of what we need to know. And which also allows students the opportunity to address their own results and their own mastery of skills and be able to identify their learning objectives and lead that into the essential standards. So the student fully understands, what skill do I now have that I may not have had before, or have I really developed and grown in this area? So we make that very clear. So when we think about the steps to creating our CFA, just touching back on what Karen shared with us earlier, examine the unpack standard, determine your assessment method and target, create your rubric, and then design the assessment from the simple to the more complex. And so I'm going to pause here for rubric questions before I pass it to Catherine to get to do the activity. Questions? Okay, great. All right, Catherine, we're going to put it all together and we are going to reduce the breakout to 45 minutes instead of 50 due to time.
All right. Thank you for speeding through that, Sudie. And I will just ask one more time, does anyone have any question about a CFA before we continue? Because we're moving into the work portion. This is the last big chunk of our time together. So now we're going to be thinking about developing the CFA based on the standard, right? We don't even have to know what students are studying. We don't have to know what unit they're in. We don't have to know if they're working on housing or if they're working on XYZ. We can use the standard to guide a prompt of a CFA and then create a rubric without knowing what students are talking about as far as topically. So you have your unpack standard, and if I'm recalling correctly, I think that both groups chose the standard that's actually in the example. Am I remembering that correctly? Okay.
I think so. That's how I remember it too.
Okay. So everyone chose Anchor 1 reading level A, I believe. It may be that one team had B. I can't recall, but so we have the unpack standard that just happens to be the one in the example. And now we're going to work on creating that formative assessment based on that standard and then a rubric based on that standard. So Karen and Sudi have taken us through what constitutes a common formative assessment and then what a rubric can look like. And I think the refrigerator example is really helpful. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So with your team, you're going to now have, you said 40 minutes, I think?
45.
45. Okay. So you're going to have 45 minutes. You're going to work with your team, and we're going to address the following things here. So as you look at this list, let's go through this. As we have done previously, you need to assign a reporter, a facilitator, and a timekeeper. You're going to refer back to your unpacked standard and the objectives that we created in the prior webinars. So if someone has those documents, please, you can be the one to start pulling those up. As a team, you're going to decide on a common formative assessment for that unpacked standard, that work that you already did. And then as a team, you're going to decide on a rubric that aligns with your CFA. Remember that we're not thinking of this in terms of testing for content or a specific topic in a unit. That CFA and the rubric should align to the essential standard and the skills. And once you have completed that, we'll be ready to share your screen, and then just make sure that we are working collaboratively. So we need to gain consensus. And I would just add here that as we went through the rubrics with Sudi, something that came up in our breakout group earlier was deciding how you want to how you want to categorize these levels. As Sudi mentioned, this a rubric is for teachers and for students. So one of the things that I liked that she showed is that you can correlate it to a number. Sometimes a number range is helpful for students, but when we think about the terms that we want to use, I find it really helpful to focus on terms that give a description of the level of the mastery skill rather than words that feel more like a judgment of the skill. So thinking about in terms of proficiency, the one that Sudi showed wrote, below proficiency, nearly proficient, you can base it off that, or you can use other descriptive terms like beginning, developing, in any range like that. It meets or it exceeds. So thinking about who is looking at this and what specific terminology do they understand that will help them gauge where they are on a level of mastery skill.
Catherine, before we send them into their breakouts, I just want to say real quickly, if you need to take a bio break, please do once you get into your breakout rooms. If you're going to be an agency breakout team, so you can take a quick break with your agency. I ask you don't take more than 10 minutes so you do have time to do the activity. And Karen, I saw your hand up, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when you have the rubric, you want for students to know, I can do this. Because when you give feedback, you want them to know, I can. Not I cannot, but I can. All right, so think of that when you're doing your rubric.
And for the ones that are lower, use yet language. It really helps with the whole growth mindset thing. Not yet, almost, those type of things, so that they can understand, follow along. And I love Karen's suggestion, I can. Feeling like I can do something feels huge to any adult, right? Especially to our adults.
Right. Yeah, and that's such a huge difference between using language that describes what's happening as opposed to just like excellent, good, average. That's not instructive for a student as far as what they can improve.
And everyone should be back.
Welcome back, everybody. I am going to pass this back to Catherine.
All right, everyone. So the first question at a point like this is simply to gauge whether or not you were able to get through the work. Were you able to create your CFA and create your rubric?
No.
Okay, so one group says no. How about the other group?
It's not, the language, of course, needs to be fine-tuned, but we got the ideas there. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, quick
So
clarifying question. What happened with the other group Where how far did we get?
Kind of the same. So we basically got through the CFA, and then we were working on the range of proficiency and what that would look like.
Okay.
Isabel was our note taker, so I think we kind of got through the descriptions of 3 and 4, and then we were kind of figuring out what the lower levels, what the specific descriptors would be for that. So I think really, what this shows is that, first of all, understanding that we can write a CFA regardless of content. Sometimes that can be a real struggle to figure that out when you first start just encountering that idea, and that can take some time. Making sure that it's connected to the standard, not connected to content. So, how does that play out when you're trying to do that? So, and then secondly would be what does proficiency look like for our students? And based on the standard, how do we gauge, those levels of 0 through 4 based on Marzano's description? So, if I could just ask a group who would like to go first. You're going to share what you have of your CFA and your rubric. And we already know that no one's is perfect. No one's is even complete yet. That's a very short amount of time to work on something like that. It's sort of a just throw you in the pool. But let's see how far you were able to get. So you can see that there is a guide here on the screen to please limit your report out to 5 minutes. So just share with us what you were able to accomplish within that time with your group. Who would like to go first?
Okay,
Isabel, I saw your hand go up. Go ahead.
yeah. Okay.
And screen
want me-
sharing is enabled if you would like to share your screen. Let me stop sharing so you can.
Okay. Sure. Let's share this. Let's just share the whole shebang here. Okay, so, well, we'll leave that. So I just kind of wrote it in my email inbox here. So we did the written communication. For the actual assessment, we decided somewhat on formulate a question from a simple text. Since this is level A, it's a little bit, I feel like we struggled a little bit with this, but it sounded like we came up with information questions about the details in this passage. And then the actual instructions would be something along these lines. Read the following text, write one question about the details in the text or about the topic. Use words to write questions about the details, what, when, where, how, other WH question words. And then for the rubric, we were able to identify number 3 proficient pretty okay, but then got stuck on like, how can we elevate this, right? Like, how can we go above and beyond, or how can the student go above and beyond? So for number 3 proficient, we decided that the student can write a question about details in a text. And then for number 4, I think, can write a question using a more complex sentence structure, can write a question relating a detail to the overall topic, or even further than that, can write an inference question or a predicting question about details in a text. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we got. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think that's pretty good summary.
Okay, so if no one else from that group has something to add, we'll move on to the next group. Who is our reporter for our next group?
That's me. I'm just getting my screen up so I can share. Okay. Cool. So the way our team tackled this challenge is we referred back to webinar 2's handout. We had that unpacked standard there. Ours was standard, I think Anchor standard 2 for writing, level B. And we started using language from the actual standard. working with our coach, Catherine, she was able to help us figure out what a good 4 looks like. So, if they're 4, they're exceeding, so they're meeting all the
Jose,
criteria.
can
Oh,
I,
yeah.
we started with the assessment, and then we built the rubric. It was like working backwards. It was like easier to do it that way. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I forgot to include that. But yeah, and then Eileen, can you chime in? I'm kind of brain dead right now. So
Okay, sorry. Well, so yeah, we started looking at the standard, which was what Jose let us know what we did first. Then we decided how would we know that students learned that. So then we came up with the idea of our assessment activity, which is the collaborative poster. Students will do a collaborative poster together first, and then they will do individual poster for the final assessment. And then we moved on to creating the rubric. So that's where we went back to the actual standard and took the language from that so the meets proficiency is the actual standard, and then exceeds, we went over to the next column to include language from that to be the exceeds level, and then we just adjusted the language down back to 0. So like I said earlier, the language still needs to be worked through, but we got the basic ideas there. And our coach helped us do all that. So it was super helpful to have her there with us.
So just additional, so the exceeds is actually standard level C, right? So our meets proficiency was level B. And then we went down based on what might be missing. So nearly meets might be an incomplete version of level B. Does not meet would be some components present, some components missing, and then 0 was most components of the standard were missing.
Okay, so thank you. So what happened with the first group who shared is that they were looking at what you did here. That's where they ended as far as looking at the level above to determine what would be the top, what would be exceed. So that's kind of where they ended off. So that's a great thing to think about as far as if we're using that range and if we want to use those descriptors, what does it mean if you're exceeding? What is the level above? Is there anything you want to add, Karen or Sudi?
I think both teams had a really solid start.
Mhm.
I think the one thing that I would say when Colton, when you go back to revise that, is to put that in the student-friendly language. Like I do think it's smart to start with, we know proficient is the standard, and then go once you get it like really massaged in, then adjust that so it's phrased in a way that the students can follow it. But I do think it makes sense. I personally like to understand the standard and know what we're reaching for through the rubric and then do the assessment. But it can work in the reverse order if that's what works best for your team to really think through it and visualize like, how are we going to assess this? Okay, now I can do my rubric. And so that's not wrong to do it that way. So I think both teams took different approaches, but did a really solid job. So good job, teams and coaches.
I think that Jose had an idea that he did with his class. So it was really nice for him to say, I did a poster and I did this and this. And so they took and ran with something that was real, that was really happened, and then tried to figure that out. So bravo for you guys. This is not easy. And as you see, it takes time, but please keep your notes because no one's ready yet to get to this point. So keep everything you've created so that you have a reference point. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So Isabel, can you put that somewhere besides your email?
Was the hand handout not working? That's why I give you
Put
guys
it
the
in
word
our
first, so you can
SharePoint.
find
We have
Put it in
the
our
handouts.
put it in our SharePoint. Or yeah,
That's a
put the copy of the handout in in our SharePoint.
great idea. So, one thing I want to say, Catherine's going to introduce our next breakout. But when you finish the activity, just go ahead and come back here. And then once everybody's back, we're going to continue on. So if you get done with assessing your assessment quickly, you can just come right back here. Okay. All right. Back to you, Catherine.
So yeah, Sudi, so I see that it's 3:15. So how are we moving forward? Because we only have 15 minutes left, correct?
We do. Yep. So we're going
Okay.
to take 10 minutes instead of 15 on this one. Oh, you beat me to adjusting
Oh,
this slide.
okay.
But
All
yeah.
right. So based on what you have, we're going to, even if we know it's incomplete, that's fine. Conceptually, I think we're all understanding what's happening here as far as the prompt that students would receive and then using the rubric to assess their level of mastery. We're going to be put in breakout groups again, and there is a link there. You're going to try to use your CFA and the rubric following, if we have time. There is a link that has a big variety of texts. So you're going to choose one there. So take a couple minutes to choose a reading and then take, 8, 9, 10 minutes to try to do the assessment that you wrote. So we're trying out the work that you just did. We know it's incomplete. We know it's still in a kind of first draft stage, but let's just try it. So you're going to choose a reading, use your assessment, and then apply your rubric. And then be ready to share how that went. We know, so it says if any revisions are needed, I'm going to say what or which revisions are needed rather than if, because that's just part of the process here, right? We're trying, we're adjusting, and then we're trying again. So is everyone able to access the link in the chat? Well, that will still be present in the breakout rooms, I'm assuming, because
It will be.
yeah. All right. So I think we're ready for the breakout rooms. Are we ready to proceed here?
We are right back to where they were.
All right.
Alrighty. Opening those up now.
Welcome back, friends. All right, we've got 2 whole minutes. So we don't have a bunch of time for debriefing. Is everybody back? Oh, wait, we're still waiting on one group, I think. Why do I not see Catherine? Oh, there's Catherine. She's right in the middle of my screen.
I'm here.
Didn't find you, so I thought everybody was back. Alrighty, so we already know our CFAs are going to need a little bit of adjustment in rubrics because we weren't done with them yet. So we're going to skip making you report out on that part. But I do want to call attention to really quick. Karen created this. I'm sorry, Karen's pouting. What's wrong? Go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
Because they can use their rubric and their assessment for anything.
Oh, well, I wasn't. Let me go back. It's going to take us a minute or two over. I'm sorry, team. But okay, so Colton, you were like, we can use this.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. How'd it go, San Diego team?
Pretty good. We can use it. We can use it too. We were just at the end of it talking about, do we really need, depending on the text that we had chosen, would we have needed to change our rubric or not?
Oh, okay.
And do you think you would, or you think you would have been good to go?
We didn't get that far.
Okay.
We did not create an opinion, but based on the rubric that we had created, we did come up with a few questions.
Nice. Very good. And Angela and Colton team, did anybody else want to share out how that's a really exciting development? I wasn't expecting you guys to come back and be like, it worked.
Oh, yeah, it worked.
Any other things you want to share from Colton?
I would just say that I think what we saw is that because we don't write a prompt based on content, we can apply it to any text.
Yay! And that's like the big learning moment with all of this, right?
Does that mean we could apply? Does that mean we could apply ours to like a legal brief?
You could.
You could if it's at that level.
The Constitution?
You could.
No, I mean,
At that level.
I mean, well, okay,
At
so
reading level or writing
You
level.
want to make sure whatever the passage is aligns with the level of which the
so
student has to understand.
it's level appropriate. So
Of course,
That's
right.
yeah, these are all level appropriate text.
Correct.
Right. But I will say that a really strong CFA that's written well, you may have to adjust the Lexile for the student to make sure that whatever level they're at, but you should be able to use generally a similar or the same CFA across levels. You may just need to make the Lexile a little bit more advanced for your more advanced group, advanced readers, your CTE folks, and then make the Lexile a little bit less. But ultimately, you could still use a similar assessment. So that's one of the really cool things about it. And you'll see when we start looking at data that we use the exact same assessment across ESL, ABE, and CTE to assess the same standard. So you guys kind of landed on that before we even got to that part of the training, which is actually really cool. So I'm glad you pouted at me, Karen, and made me slow down. I'm sorry I'm keeping you guys over, but I think it was important.
That's good
You got
work.
to celebrate the small victories. That's important.
Yeah.
All right. So I also want to call attention to this really great resource that Karen shared with us last month. And so I threw it into our handout packet because I thought it would be useful to you all. But it's she gave an example of a template and an example of a CCR reading lesson that shows like how they're teaching directly to that standard that they're working on. It's really detailed. It includes and it follows the WIPIA model also. So if you've done any other CalPro or OTAN lesson planning courses, trainings, you'll recognize that model. But it's really, really cool. And I wish we had more time for Karen to explain the whole lesson. So maybe next time we're together in May, we'll take a pause so Karen can walk us through it because it's just such a really great lesson.
It's
And
really
as
good.
I was like, oh, this is great. We got to put this in.
And this is in our packet
It's in your
for
handout
webinar
packet.
3?
Yes.
Yep, it's in there. Just scroll down.
And if anyone has questions, just email me. I created this from the WIPIA, and I think it's right on, especially to focus on the actual standard instead of focusing on content.
And as a standards nerd, the second I saw this and Karen sent it to me, I got really excited. So thank you for sharing that with us, Karen. Really appreciate that. All right, so quick wrap up. We covered common formative assessments, rubrics. You put it all together and you also assessed your assessment and rubrics successfully. So I call that checking off those 3 objectives very well. Great job, team. Y'all did a fantastic job and owe yourselves a round of applause. We'll come back together May 7th and 8th virtually. I will update that meeting invite. I know it says Sacramento and then we pivoted to online, so we have to adjust that. But same bat time, not the same bat time and channel. We'll be much earlier when we see you in May. Now, April is technically a bi-month because so many people have spring break and things going on, but coaches will still be checking in with you and you will have your monthly meeting on whichever day works best for you. In May, we're going to focus on assessment results, feedback to team and students, responding to resistance. I have a feeling that that's going to be important for a few of us. And then your implementation report outs based on your SMART goal, and you'll be sharing out on how things are going. The responding to resistance activity is super fun and a little bit funny, but also helps you learn a bit more about different personality styles. You do have homework assignments that are coming up that are due. There's a team report out. That's just a reminder of what you're reporting out on. You have a video to watch that's 13 minutes on giving feedback to student learning. We'll also talk quite a bit about that when we come together. There's also another activity in there on mission, vision, values, and goals to think about where are you with those things in the PLC team? Is that something you need to investigate and work on together? And then lastly is responding to resistance. That was another thing that you can just watch and do, etc. But we will also be doing that activity together as a group in a virtual environment because, again, it's fun. And I like to have fun with our PLC Institute. Any questions before I let you go? All right. Well, thank you for hanging in there. As a reminder, your coaches are available as a resource to you, as am I if you need anything.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sodi.
Yeah,
so are all those projects individual or group?
If you look at the last page of your handouts, that's actually shown there. Not all of them are individual, and not all of them are group. And here, I'll scroll down so you can see that here on the very last page of your handout.
Okay. Yeah.
There it is. So if you look on that last page, the team report out, that is, you don't have to turn anything in. You're going to share out when we're together as a group. And so you don't have to, again, don't have to turn anything in, but that is a team activity. There should not be one person doing that. All of you should be doing that together. The feedback is a team activity included. You don't have to turn it in, but it is included. Mission, vision, values, and goals requires one team submission. So one person submits on behalf of the team. Again, collaborative activity. And then the video, there's a team activity that's included that you can do together. There's no submission there required. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you need anything, reach out to me or your coach. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you on May 7th. Have a great evening and a fabulous weekend. Happy Friday.
Great work.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.